When our poster went out on Facebook and all the social media channels, we knew that what will be shared tonight will be worth gold. My name is Ilana Afrika Bredenkamp, and I'm delighted to host this event tonight, Buying a Home, All You Need to Know. It is really my honor to bring you someone who works in realty and property, who has experience of over 27 years, that is not just the CEO of First Realty Company, but also her knowledge and her insights on property, whether this is a buyer's market or not, and what we can do with the rest of 2020 as we're going into 2021 with our money and property. There is no better person than to bring Denise Zaslansky. It is really an honor to see you. How are you?
Hi, Lana. Lovely to meet you as well. And as I told you, I'm a big fan of yours.
Well, I'm a fan too, and of your family. Buying a home, all you need to know. It sounds terrifying. And in this, we give people reassurance. We say we're going to make things easy, less emotional, and take the anxiety out of buying a home. I'm going to get straight into it. So first of all, I want to mention that you can ask questions throughout. We'll be taking your questions, and Denise will be answering them. When purchasing a home, what are we looking out for? Are we looking at the appearance? Are we looking at loopholes? Do we look for finances first? If I'm a first-time buyer and I'm looking to buy a home, what is the process?
Okay, Ilana, I think so. As we chatted earlier, Ilana and I have to tell everybody, is it's a very emotional experience, very, very different to a business situation if you were going to buy a commercial property. So you're buying a home, and a lot of people are first-time buyers. It's emotional. Be prepared to be emotional, but you do not. We just chatted earlier, and we said it does not have to be a stressful situation. So, to avoid stress and disappointment, you need to be very au fait with your finances and find out exactly what amount you're comfortable with buying the property for, your monthly repayments, and what additional amounts are important apart from your monthly repayments. So my suggestion is to speak to a bond originator, somebody who specializes in putting together your financial situation, assessing your financial situation, working out what is an affordable bond or repayment for you on a monthly basis. And with that knowledge of what your bond could be, to then use that and say what additional finance you'd have to put into the property, taking into account additional monthly expenses, as I said, and then go and talk to an agent and say, right, this is basically what my affordability is. What kind of property can you show me in my affordability? Obviously, we have a certain criteria that determines where we want to live, the area we want to live, if you need to be close to schools or work, whatever the situation. So various lifestyle changes, discussions would ensue as well. So one would have an idea then on what the amount of the property should be, your purchase price should be, the areas you would like to live in, the accommodation you require. And often you come and you say, well, oh, I'd love a 3-bed, 3-bath. And when you look at your finances and the area you want to live in, you'll see, oh, that, it doesn't fit into my affordability. And my answer would be try and find a property in the area you wish to choose to live in, and then grow with that property. You can always make changes to the property. Instead of finding your perfect dream home and you find you're 2 hours driving distance from your place of work or where your kids are from school.
Great advice. And I enjoy how you say affordability. Now, most of us, even though we think we understand our budgets and our finances, are not really successful when it comes to being savvy about our own finances. Do you chase the bond first, or do you chase the dream? I have this house in mind and it has 6 bedrooms and I found the area, but I don't know whether I can afford it. What do you chase first? Do you chase the bond? Can I afford this, affordability? Or do I chase the dream first?
Definitely the bond, definitely the affordability. All right. So technically we all know, we do our budgets and we see, right, this is the monthly spend that I would like to make every month. So wherever you are, in whichever bracket, you decide, right, this is my monthly spend that I would like to actually put into this house that I'm going to be buying, whether it's a house to live in or an investment property. so that you know upfront what amount you'd like to invest in the property. And then to find out what additional amounts we spoke about. There's rates and taxes. There's, if you're buying into a sectional title complex, there's levies, there's water and electricity, there's refuse removal, there's insurance, and we can't forget security. So often there's an amount for security that we need to actually include into our monthly budget. Okay, whether you're paying a security company or if there's a guard in the road or the complex you're living in, take that into account and get the global figure of what the total is. And armed with that knowledge, go onto the website, all right, and look for properties within a price range. And better yet, I'm still old fashioned, so I love to talk to people. I'll phone a reputable agent and I'll say, help me. I would love to live in such and such an area. So you asked earlier, what do you look for first, the dream or not? You have the affordability sorted. You determine which area you want, and then you say, what can you show me? What is available in this, within a 3-kilometer or 5-kilometer radius of a certain place? And with that knowledge, allow the agent to direct you to various properties. Or again, if I fall into your age group, Ilana, you'll go to the website, you'll go to the various property portals. You'll go to the various property portals and you'll type in, okay? Again, once you're armed with affordability and with the price range you're looking at, you'll go to the property portal, you'll put in the areas you're looking at, the price ranges you look at, and you'll see a list of properties. And again, you'll phone the agents concerned and ask to view the properties. We'll get on just now to what to look for when you view the properties.
Look, I'm on property sites all the time, and having spoken to you earlier as well, we got to know what to look for. And I think the more you look, the more you also know what to look out for. I see that a few people have just joined us. Welcome to our chat tonight. We're talking about all you need to know when it comes to buying a home. Denise Zaslansky, she's joining us tonight. What's the difference between running to your bank, you are with Absa or Nedbank or whoever you bank with, and a mortgage originator? The one says, give us your money or give me all your documents, and you need to hand in your ID book and statements. And sometimes it's really overwhelming because they send you the sheet and they go incomes and expenses. Who do you choose? Do you go to your bank or do you go to the mortgage originator?
I prefer the mortgage originator route, and banks, if any bankers are talking to us, I hope you don't mind. It's still business for the banks, but the mortgage originator gives you the opportunity of sending in your, viewing your profile, okay, and then determining and understanding what different banks' criteria are. For instance, one bank, again, if we're talking various banks and what they offer, one bank will look at certain criteria and another bank won't. The mortgage originator will know that. And they will then send your application to the banks that they believe will be best suited or will grant the bond that you're looking for. And again, mortgage originators, they often send to all 4 banks simultaneously, the 4 major banks simultaneously, not to leave out a few others, but depending on the person's criteria, it will qualify them to go to other financial institutions. And they will then come back and offer you the rate, the rate of interest which each bank offers. And by doing so, they can then go to the various banks and, on your behalf and say, look, you offered X amount at a specific bank, but you would prefer to bank with another one. Would they match that interest rate? And when you compound all the interest that you're paying over the years and you're able to negotiate a better rate up front, you will find you're saving hundreds of thousands of rands over the term of your bond.
Let's stay with first-time buyers. I see all these amazing adverts where you can buy your dream home, whether you are a first-time buyer or want to obtain a 1-bedroom for investment purposes. And basically you're buying a dream. There is no house. It's all just on plan, and they're showing you a picture and they say to you, you know what, buy. This is what it could look like. What's your opinion on that? I mean, do you go out and buy in Pretoria or in Cape Town when you are seeing this picture, you're buying a dream? Who do I trust? The investment, the guy who's building the house, or my gut?
Again, it depends on the each particular development. So my advice would be, and again, you know, you're buying a dream. Many properties have sold from developments on, you know, we sell off plan. It's a very normal way of selling multi units, right? However, I say to people, they must make sure that it's a reputable developer. What is the developer's criteria? Now, some developers have sold thousands and thousands of properties, and their names are familiar. And you know, those are people that have been in the industry a long time. They've trusted, they've produced properties. It's easy to go on the website, look them up. But you have to also give new developers an opportunity. But where the developer themselves have not got a long record that you can go back and check on, people must make sure that the developer, i.e., owns the land, that the property's been rezoned, that the plans for the units have been passed. Okay, find out when the expected date for building would commence, and is there an escape clause if during a certain period the developer does not start building, right? And that most importantly, the deposit that the client would be putting down, the purchaser would be putting down, goes into a trust account of a reputable attorney or reputable estate agency. Please, a lot of people have lost, we know, have lost deposits, are basically just transferring it into anybody's accounts. All right, then, you know, they're not aware of it. So, and I would say, if you've never bought before, it's your first time buying, take that offer to purchase. Don't just stand on site and sign very quickly. Take the offer to purchase, talk to a colleague. You know, not everyone has access to an attorney. Talk to your employee, find out, say to the developer, please give us references of people who you built for, who've worked before, your attorneys you're dealing with. Speak to the, you know, if it's a reputable or good firm of attorneys representing the developer, they won't mind speaking to the client and walking them through the process, even before they put the offer in. So to be very cautious before you pay your first deposit.
In a while, we'll be taking your questions and Denise will be answering them. I see that there's a few comments that's coming through already, so keep on chatting. We will be getting to them in a while. You know, last week we had a chat with David Shapiro and he said something that wow, it stuck with me. He says, we part with our money too quickly. We are so keen on paying this deposit, but when it comes to buying a fridge or a tumble dryer, you know, we'll do all the research whether this thing can actually do what it's meant to do. So really valuable advice. Is it a time to rent or to buy? Buying just seems like so much hassle. Isn't it a time to just rent and feel like, you know, there's so many properties standing open because of COVID?
So I'm going to answer you in 2 tranches. Okay. So is it a time to rent or buy? Some people cannot buy. Their finances do not allow it. So there will always be place for renters and for landlords. So that is, you know, the question, I think everybody aspires to own their own homes. In South Africa particularly, our culture is one of home ownership. So we aspire to own that home. If you cannot afford to own your home, if you cannot build up a deposit, and if the banks won't grant 100% bond and circumstances don't allow, yes, we rent thousands of properties a year. So there's always is place for the tenant. But if it's at all possible to purchase a home, now it's never been easier. I made Ilana smile earlier because I said that it's 7% interest rate. It's the lowest interest rate I've ever known. When I was a child, the interest rate was at 9%. 25 years ago, the interest rate shot up to 25%. All right. So we're sitting now at 7% interest rate, and the banks will even give you a bond over a 30-year period, 360 months. So it is relatively easy to obtain a bond today. Relatively easier. The banks are very cautious when they grant the bonds. They look at your affordability now, and they also take the affordability and say, what happens if the interest rates go up to 9% or 10% again? Will this client in time afford that repayment at this as well? Okay, so if there is a way you can become a homeowner, you can purchase your property. Purchasing a property gives you stability. It's a wonderful feeling to own your property, not to have to think, my goodness, will the landlord decide to sell the property? Will I be able to increase the term of the lease? Will the land, and the tenant is living on an annual basis with the thought process. Will he renew? Will the rental be increased? Will I be able to afford it? So the affordability comes together again in the purchasing, but the purchasing gives you the security and capital appreciation. Please don't forget that. Up until the last 6 or 7 years, property prices doubled in South Africa every 10 years, right? And we've done stats over and over again. So if you were lucky enough to buy in 1960 and sell in the early 1970s, you had doubled your money. Again, we saw the same thing from 80 to 90. Unfortunately, the last 10 years, we haven't seen the same stats, but hopefully we'll get over COVID, life will continue, economy will pick up, and we'll see the same situation happening. So if there is a way, I often tell my clients, do without the dinner out on a monthly basis. Go for coffee instead. Drive a little bit less. That 700 Rand or 1,000 Rand that it costs to fill your tank with petrol, 100,000 Rand will qualify you for 100,000 Rand bond.
Wow.
Okay, so that 1,000 Rand on petrol. So today it's actually 700 Rand per month qualifies you for 100,000 Rand bond. Okay.
Great advice. Going to the questions already, we had one from Levi. He says, what are the main red flags to look out for when viewing a house? I almost want to park that question because, Levi, I'm going to get to that in a while because we're going to talk about offer to purchase and also things around the home that we need to look out for. Also had one from Khubudi. She says, sometimes the mortgage originators will give you feedback from 4 or 5 banks that they've applied to, but will insist that they didn't get feedback from the last bank. So it seems like there's a trust issue. They're saying they got feedback from 4, but they've actually applied to 5. So she says, how do we know that the offer that we accept is not from their favorite bank, but is actually from the best for the buyer itself?
Well, there has to be trust. There has to be trust, but the bond originator would not be, it wouldn't be in their favor at all to favor a specific bank. They have to present, the client would see or get a letter from each bank telling them what they will grant, what bond they will grant. And the client then will see it in writing and be able to make an informed decision on what's being offered by the bank. Once the bank has sent a letter confirming that they will issue a bond grant to the client can then decide within a 5-day period of what bond that they wish to approve and sign that as an approval for the grant.
We had another question from Zaka saying, will the interest rate stay at 7% for the duration of the loan? So I understand what he's asking it. I guess, yeah. Okay, I'll let you answer it. All
right. It would be beautiful, but no. The interest rate changes according to the economic situation of the country, etc., and it will change. And we, as I say, over a long period of time, you will find that it varies. I do believe that the banks, the Reserve Bank, have taken a stance and are keeping the interest rate quite stable. In fact, for the last 3 years, the interest rates have been the most stable. That means they've changed the least, okay, over the last 3 years and in favor of the purchaser. So they don't want to kill the economy. We don't want it killed, and they're looking after us on the interest rates. So be aware that it will change, but we all hope it will never go back to unrealistic amounts. For South Africa, the 7%, 8%, 9% is very, very realistic.
It's also very comfortable because now most of us can actually afford some stuff. Buying a home, all you need to know, that's what we're talking about. Thank you for your questions. Anonymous says, at what age is the bank keen to give you a bond? Would they consider granting a bond to someone who's over the age of 47 years old?
Oh, absolutely. 47 is young.
Yeah.
It's very, very young. So just on that score, the banks will only register a bond on someone, to somebody who's 21 or over, right? So if an 18-year-old is sitting watching, no, you won't get a bond registered in your name. You need to be 21. And from age 60, 65, that's when they pull back a lot. So if they will, we've seen bonds granted to people of 60 and 65, 67, a little bit older, but the term, the length of the bond is going to be for a shorter period. So if you are at an enviable age of 47, the banks will grant a bond with a 20-year term. Okay, where you're able to pay it off over a 20-year term. The older you get, the more they look at a repayment and in what time period it will be repaid. Ilana, can I mention something?
Please do.
For our first-time buyers, a lot of people don't realize that they can cancel that bond when they sell the house. So they don't have, we've seen it with first-time buyers who've never bought before. And you think, okay, I'm buying, I've got to pay off this house in 20 years. Yes, the bond, if you stay in the home, you need to pay it off over 20 years. But if you decide to sell it after 5 or 6 or 10 years, you can cancel the bond. And whatever amount is still owing on the bond, it will be repaid from the proceeds you're getting from the sale of the house.
Yeah.
All right. It's a something.
No, I love that. I love how you just go for it. This is your discussion. Ephraim says, can't a buyer choose to fix the interest rates? Obviously, the buyer can lose out if it drops more. So he's asking about a fixed rate. So when you sign in 7% now, can you fix it like that for the entire term of the 20 years?
So the bank, the longest we've seen in the past is the banks agreeing to fix an interest rate for a period of 3 years. However, the banks usually are the winners. And at the moment, we're seeing these favorable interest rates. The banks are not, if they would fix the interest rate at the moment, we'd find that they'd fix it at a much higher rate than what they anticipate happening. Because they don't, it's a gamble, put it that way. So the only advantage of a fixed interest rate is for somebody who's earning a fixed salary and wants to budget accordingly. My advice, though, is because, for instance, if it was at 7 and they fixed it at 9, they would know that in the 2 or 3 year period they're fixing it, that they would have a good inkling that they're not losing money in that period. So that most probably even fix it a slightly higher amount. My advice is, however hard it is, work out what the difference is, or get your mortgage originator or your estate agent to work out what the difference between 7% and 9% repayment is, and save that 2%, the difference on the repayment. If it's 2,000 Rand a month difference or 1,500 Rand a month, put that aside or pay it into your bond. Because what we haven't discussed is, if you pay more into the bond than it is necessary, the period of the loan is going to come down substantially. And you will find, instead of taking 20 years to pay off your bond, you can pay off your bond the same amount in 15 years. Say you've registered a bond for 2 million. You can pay off that 2 million Rand bond in a 15-year period only by adding an additional 1,000 Rand a month or 1,500 Rand into your bond on a monthly basis.
And that's exciting, right? Because you don't want it hanging around all the time. We're talking now about buying still, and soon we'll get to selling. So please stay tuned for those answers to your questions as well. We have this passion and we see how people live, and it's beautiful, and we're online and we're looking at all these properties that are appealing. But when buying, what's the difference between buying as an individual, buying into a trust, buying into a company? And is there more of a benefit buying into a trust and a company than buying as an individual?
Okay, so there's a few questions there. I'll answer them as best as I can. It depends on your circumstances. If you're buying a property to live in, you don't have other properties, right? And you're buying it, live in, and hopefully one day sell, move into a different place, leave it to your children, whatever. It is best just to buy it in your own name. It's far easier to have a bond registered in your own name than it is into a company to start with, to qualify. But the disadvantage of putting the property into a company or trust when you are an individual who doesn't have a portfolio of properties, where you have 1 or 2 properties, you'll find, we mentioned earlier, there's a capital gain to be had. You're selling your property 10 years later, your property's appreciated in price, and now there's a profit. And of course, the government is entitled to tax on the profit. It's called capital gains tax. If you've bought in your own name and you bought a property for 2 million and it's appreciated in an 8 to 10 year period, the capital appreciation, and your property is now, the value is 4 million. So which means you've made a 2 million rand profit. Another discussion, Ilana and everybody, is on what you can deduct in terms of what the profit is. And it's not wear and tear, it's only additions you've made to enhance the property. You can't deduct for normal wear and tear from capital gains tax. The first 2 million rand of profit is exempt from tax, which means if you're selling for 4 million and you've made that profit of nearly 2 million, you will not have to pay tax. If it's in the company or a trust and you sell and there's a 2 million rand profit, 50% of the profit is taxed at company tax rate, at the company tax rate. Okay, so 50% of the profit at approximately 29%, which is a tax rate, will be taxed. You'll find yourself paying 400,000 rand to the receiver of revenue, which could have been avoided if you'd put it in your own name. So my advice is to always, if you have an inkling to put it, that you want a property in a company or a trust, to speak to your accountant to find out, is it necessary for your financial needs? Is it necessary, and does it suit what you're doing?
I love how you say get advice and get different opinions, and that there has to be a matter of trust, because you're asking for advice about a lot of money that you're spending on either an investment property or somewhere that you're going to live. I'm so curious about this trust thing, because I was almost caught up in a scam before because of that whole, you need to put things in a trust and this is how it works. But a trust, I would imagine, could benefit you when there's a will and testament in place, right? So let's say you've got small children and there's an inheritance, so to speak. Will buying into a trust benefit your family, God forbid, if you had to pass on?
So it depends how the trust is formulated, right? And also the executive who you appoint will have the benefit of administering the trust. The trust will form part of your will, and that the trust will have its own assets, which can be distributed, but it will be determined how it can be distributed in terms of the will. Again, an attorney, my advice on a will is go to an attorney who specializes in drawing up wills. He specializes in an accountants who do trusts. But Ilana, the average person who's buying a property to live in, or 3 or 4 or 8 investment properties, except right, and the investment properties forms part of their pension portfolio, would not have to put their properties into a trust. So you will find that the client with a much higher financial portfolio will then know to put the property, the accountants will give them advice and protection on the trust. The only time that you have protection by putting a property into a company or trust is if you yourself, if the person himself goes insolvent, the company, the assets in the company are generally protected, or in the trust.
Right. But we're not planning for liquidation, so that's not what that's not how we start. Okay. Wonderful. COVID has come and swept clean. I mean, we've had many conversations in this space where we talked about how to be resilient, how to get back up. In terms of getting rid of a property, now I'm talking about the seller. You are in this house, COVID has taken away and lockdown, and you've been retrenched. You're unable to pay for this house that you're living in. I've got 2 questions around that, and I see we're almost running out of time. I mean, I could sit with you for hours, but if you need to sell your house, is there something that protects the seller so that you don't have to sell your house? Because you're probably not going to get the value for it at this stage. And then also say that you really need to. How do you go about doing it, especially now?
Unfortunately, there isn't a protection. That when you enter into a a situation where you register a bond, you undertake to pay a certain amount of money back to the bank every month. During COVID, most of the banks offered their clientele a payment structure where they said,
Right.
we'll, 3 months, you don't have to pay for 3 or 6 months. You don't have to pay your repayment on a monthly basis. But what the banks did now in general, I'm not talking about one particular bank, what they did in general was said, okay, so we'll put aside 6 months of repayments, and that amount will have to be paid back within a 3-year period with interest accruing on that. So people found that they couldn't pay for the 3 months, but it was pushing them much further into a much more difficult situation following payments after the payment holiday, so to speak. So where they would normally be paying, say, 15 or 20,000 Rand a month, they would have to be paying that together with interest accruing on the amount that they missed paying up front.
Right.
So the bond payment is most important when you're buying a property. Ensure that you feel comfortable with whatever you're paying on a bond payment per month. Otherwise, unfortunately, the banks aren't in the business of owning property. They're in the business of lending money. If they find that the bond amount's not being paid for month after month after month, they will institute legal action.
So far, you've given us a lot of reassurance, and it does feel like buying a house can be stress-free, except when we think of the OTP, the offer to purchase. And I think this is where Levi's question will come in. He's talking about red flags. And I mean, in an offer to purchase, I have seen so many. I remember obtaining a property once that I signed the offer to purchase, and on email, I was promised that the furniture will come with the property. And then the house was sold, and I arrived at this flat in Sea Points, and it was empty. And they said, you know what? The furniture was never on the offer to purchase, and therefore it's not yours. What are some of the red flags? Levi's question. What are some of the red flags in an OTP that one can look out for? And I mean, now I'm also talking about that voetstoots clause that everyone, they give you a house with cracks without a foundation and says to you, oh, well, it was sold voetstoots, What do we look out for in an offer to purchase?
Okay, so I'm going back a step. When you're looking through the property, and a lot of people think, oh, I'll save agents commission, I'll quickly buy the house without an agent. The agent is there to guide you, and the reputable agencies today will have a disclosure document, which the seller and the agent fill in prior to you even seeing the house. When the agent does the listing on the property, the disclosure document will lead them through the house, and which should be quite detailed, asking questions of the sellers. Often the seller doesn't even realize that things are wrong until you question them. There's a second geyser, but I haven't tried it for years. We don't use that bathroom. It needs to be disclosed. Let's find out, does the geyser work or doesn't it? What is, do you have problems with your drains? Do you have keys for all the locks? Do the windows stick? Small things like that. There's nothing worse than moving into a property and trying to open a sliding door and it doesn't open. All right.
Or the pool pump doesn't work.
Yes, and when you viewed the property, it was beautiful and blue, and then the seller didn't put out, anything in. So to cover yourself, just let's go back. So when you're walking through the property and you're viewing the property, you get two things. One's called a latent defect, and the other's a patent defect. Patent defect is something that you should be able to see while you're walking through the property. So is there a cracked window pane? If the agent doesn't point it out to you, she might say to you, listen, it was there staring straight at you. I saw you looking through the window. A reputable or professional agent will say to you, Levi, the window is cracked. Would you like me to get the seller to repair it? The seller can always come back and say, look, at this price I'm selling today, I'm not repairing it. And then it's the purchaser's decision whether they're going to, put in an offer or not. So properties are being sold at the moment at really reasonable prices, and offers and sellers will say, I'm not fixing this, but it's buyer beware. Rather beware and know what is working and what is not working. Do all 4 plates of the stove work? Don't be afraid. Say to the agent, okay, the agent obviously will say to the owner, please can we put on all 4 plates of the stove? Does the oven door close properly? Do all the light switches work? Are there globes? Okay, these are small things, but can be big when you move into a house and all of a sudden you find that there's sewage in the pooling up outside. We've seen everything in our, you know, in over the years. So these are the things when you walk through a house, obviously you fall in love, as we said, emotion, and then you put the motion aside and you go into business mode. And now, Mr. Agent or Mr. Seller, tell me about the property. Again, an agency who has a disclosure document will say, Mr. Buyer, this is the disclosure document. Let me go through it with you. Are there plans on the property? Very important. A lot of sellers sell without plans, you know, and having registered plans on the property. The purchaser will then want to do renovations and find out there aren't plans. But once it's registered, it's all very well saying, oh, I'm going to sue the seller. You don't want to get involved in suing.
Yeah. Well, while you are drinking some water, I see that Adam has also asked a question. Adam, we'll get to your question shortly. Okay, so we're still talking about the offer to purchase, patent, the footsteward clause, and latent. I'm there.
Right. So, and everything must be reduced to writing. Please don't get someone say to you, oh, I'll find out, I'll let you know. Have it in writing. For instance, the Consumer Protection Act.
Yeah.
The Consumer Protection Act. Everybody thought when it came out that it would protect the consumer. It only protects you if you are buying from a property developer or a person whose business it is buying and selling properties. So it's either going to be a developer who's building clusters or townhouses or flats, or alternatively, it's going to be someone who owns 20 properties and he buys and sells properties for a living. Then you as a purchaser are protected. But from a usual homeowner, it's up to you, Mr. Buyer. Purchaser beware. So let's just go through an offer very, very quickly. Make sure the word vacant occupation, where it says you're going to take occupation of the property, make sure the word vacant is in front of occupation. Because if you have a tenant in the property and the tenant is squatting in the property, you will be responsible if there's no word as vacant. If there is a word as vacant, seller will have to, although registration takes place, the seller will have to pay you occupational rental till that tenant is out. Reduce everything to writing. Bond is suspensive, the property suspensive on a bond, right? All the plants, you know, you walk into a home, they've got beautiful pot plants all over that actually help, you know, make you fall in love. And then if you don't add that the pot plants are to remain, the seller is quite legally able to remove the pot plants. They're not a fixture. Anything that's not attached to the property is not a fixture. As a matter of interest, if you have a kitchen counter with bar stools that match the kitchen counter, in a court of law, it's been determined that those bar stools can be deemed to have been called a fixture because they match. But again, be cautious and write bar stools, 4 bar stools in the kitchen to remain. Okay, so please be very cautious of what you discuss. If curtains are going to remain, have it in each offer will usually have other conditions, and in the other conditions or as an annexure to the offer to purchase, make a note of what your requirements are. Again, the agent or the attorney, whoever you're giving your offer to, will take the offer and fill it in according to your wants and needs requirements. They will present to the seller. If the seller chooses, if the seller says, look, I know I've got a faulty pool pump, but I'm not prepared to change it. If you, Mr. Purchaser, are happy to buy it that way, that's fine. It will be deleted from the offer and you'll buy it, but you'll have the option to go in knowing exactly what you're buying and what you have to be cautious about.
Well, we have time for one more question. Adam is asking, what factors should you consider to avoid overcapitalizing the value of the property when you renovate it? So he's worried that he's going to spend too much money renovating this property.
It's an excellent, excellent question. Thank you for that. So today we have the ability of seeing, again, via the web and the different property portals, what the average prices in the areas are. You can ask a qualified agent in your area their opinion again, but you can also do your homework and look and see these are the values in the area. The top values say 5 million and beginning value is 2.5 million. And if I do renovations, if I buy in at 2.5 and I increase the value of my property or my renovations with 2.5, I'm comfortable, I'm within a price range. But don't buy in an area where your average price range is between 2.5 and 5, renovate for 5 million, then want to sell a year later for 7, because your property it might sell, but you most probably find that it will be very, very difficult to sell. So based on the current prices in the area will determine what amount you can spend. I hope that answers that.
It definitely does. Denise, you are incredible. And thank you for your time this evening. We really enjoyed you. Your knowledge is astounding and it's really helped so many people. This recording will be live on Chabad South Africa's Facebook page, and you can also find it on YouTube. Denise Zaslansky, you have to find her. She is the CEO and founder of First Realty Company. She's been involved in estates and in buying. We've got a few thank yous that's coming through. Thank you so much, Ephraim. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for helping us through this. I must tell you, I really enjoy looking at property, and tonight I learned quite a bit. So I appreciate you very, very
glad.
much.
And I hope that from our discussions earlier, you'll build up your own property portfolio as a pension one day and enjoy it. Thank you,
may
Lon.
I never retire. And may this advice also help you through the rest of 2020 and also beyond. Have a wonderful week, and thank you so much for joining all of us. Denise, we have to say cheers now. Say bye-bye.
Bye, everybody, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Lana.
Thank you.
You make one feel so comfortable. I was so nervous up front, but thank you.
No, you shouldn't be nervous. I think we're still live, Denise, just in case.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.